So welcome everybody. I call this meeting to order at 7 p.m. And I would like to remind everybody all mobile devices should be turned off or switched to silent mode. And as always, we will start with our municipal safety share. So go ahead, student councillor.
Okay, so safety tips for winter safety indoors and out. While it's true that many of us spend more time indoors in the winter, there are also those who embrace the outdoors in the snow and cooler temperatures. For many parts of Canada, winter can mean bitter cold and winter storms that bring high winds, icy rain, or heavy snowfall. This winter, get prepared for whatever the season will bring, whether you're indoors or out. Follow these 5 tips for staying safe in a Canadian winter. Tip number 1, get informed and go outdoors. Are you eagerly awaiting for your chance to hit the slopes, dreaming of making tracks with snowshoes? Follow the 3 T's: trip planning, training, and taking the essentials for any outdoor adventure. Tip number 2, stay safe indoors. Winter is a busy season for fires in Canada. That's why it's important to be mindful of fire prevention and safety. Make sure you have working smoke alarms. Don't leave burning candles unattended, and if a pot catches fire while cooking, put a lid on it. Tip number 3, check your family emergency kit. You likely have some basic emergency items already in your home, such as a flashlight, battery-operated radio, food, water, and blankets. The key is to make sure they are organized, easy to find, and easy to carry. You can put them in a suitcase or a backpack, just in case you need to evacuate your home. Tip number 4, keep an emergency kit in your vehicle. Prepare an emergency kit and keep it in your vehicle. Refresh the supplies for winter. For example, add an extra blanket, or a few new food items. Tip number 5, check the weather reports. When severe winter weather threatens Environment Canada issues special alerts to notify Canadians that affect areas so that they can take steps to protect themselves and their property. Winter may be cold, but it doesn't have to be dangerous. Stay warm and stay safe, and enjoy your winter inside and out.
Okay, thank you. Are there any additions or deletions to the agenda? Yeah.
Yes, Your Worship. Can I please add a report for the Chamber of Commerce?
Absolutely. So that'll be item 11A, and I will bring a report from the library board as item 11B.
And Your Worship, we will defer item 6A, members providing a verbal update on their attendance at Roma, to the next regular meeting when Mayor Dumas is back, please.
Okay, thank you. So I have a motion that council hereby accepts the agenda for the Monday, February 25th, 2019 regular meeting of council as circulated or amended. Moved by Councillor Lake, second by Councillor Valance. Any questions of the agenda? All in favor? Okay, carried. Are there any disclosures of interest? Okay, so I have a motion for the minutes that council hereby adopts the minutes of the regular meeting of council held on Monday, January 14th, 2019, and the closed meeting of council held on Monday, January 14th, 2019, as circulated or amended. Moved by Councillor Lake, seconded by Councillor Tabushi. Any questions regarding the minutes? Okay. All in favor? Carried. Okay. So tonight we have a delegation. We have Mr. David Giuliano coming down to speak to us about the Community Collective.
I don't think we have a delegation. Thank you. So I'll do my best to work with this, and I'm going to make a recommendation that be available for people who want to make presentations. I hope you can follow along on your tab, and I'm going to have to pop my glasses on and off as we go. So thank you for taking some time. I'm sorry I wasn't able to be here at the presentation afternoon. Just had other commitments that day. But I do feel like it's an important time to update folks here on the work of the Marathon Community Collective. The collective is an incorporated nonprofit charity serving Marathon and region since 2004. So this is our 15th year in business as an incorporated body. Mayor Bell was the mayor at the time. He's cutting a loaf of bread in the photo you're looking at. Marathon Community Collective, the purpose of it is to assist those in need in Marathon and region. The building on Evergreen, we've named the Donaldson Place out of recognition of Mitchell Donaldson's, the big role he played. And I can say initially we got started because the Salvation Army was leaving town and they wanted St. John's Church to take it on. We felt at the church that it would be better handled as a whole community. And we're really glad we did, because one of the things they told us at Salvation Army was that they had about 5 people using the food bank each month. You'll see the numbers have changed quite a bit. And I think in large part that's because there was a lot of, you had to prove income and a lot of those kind of barriers. But the Salvation Army gave the building and the food bank and so on to the community collective. So the activities of the collective, oh, and the smiley face is our logo. We were having a hard time finding one that wasn't already taken, and I guess this is public domain. So when you see those little coin boxes around town with the smiley face, that's us. So we run a food bank, a thrift store, a Christmas hamper program, and a community garden. The purpose of the Marathon Food Bank is to provide approximately 3 days of emergency food relief up to 1 time per month. So you can only come once a month, and what you can expect is to get food that enough food to get you through 3 days. We're not an organization that kind of provides food randomly at different times. Big change in 2019, we've moved to using Joe Fresh cards so that people can shop at the grocery store. And the process is you come, you get a card, and before you can get another card, a following month you need to bring the receipt and the card back to show that it was used for the intended purposes. The reason that we changed it is had to do with clients' dietary choices and needs. As you can imagine, just because you're poor doesn't mean you don't have allergies or preferences. And so we wanted to make sure that we treat people with dignity. Also access to fresh food. You know, this way people can buy fruit, vegetables, milk, eggs, meat. Reduce waste and garbage. We get a lot of food donated that we cannot use. Past date, past best before, past expiry date, and I'm telling you, I gave serious consideration to whether or not we might be able to insulate the building with macaroni and cheese, because we have so many boxes of macaroni and cheese, and believe it or not, just because you're poor does not mean you want to eat macaroni and cheese every day. And of course the outdated, unneeded foods, and demand on volunteers. Because what we were doing is buying a lot of the groceries, making up the bags, so you've got someone buying them, picking them up, bringing them back, setting up the bags, and distributing them, food that may or may not be what people are looking for. So just some statistics, I hope you're on that page. Food bank clients in 2018, a little bit of, I can give really detailed ones, but in the time we have available, I think this might be enough. So we had 188 households in Marathon, Big Datong, and Heron Bay registered. In those households, 85 of them had 2 or less individuals who were accessing the food bank. In 103 of them, there were 3 or more. Monthly average, we service about 90 households, 143 from Marathon, 45 from Heron Bay, Bitagon. Really important to note, 171 of those households have children. Sorry, there are 171 children represented in those households. The other thing is that we haven't been keeping track of ages above, but the national demographic, and I think we're seeing that, is that the biggest demand, growing demand, is from seniors. Marathon Thrift Store, the purpose is to generate income to support the Marathon Food Bank. So what happens is all the money they make is what we use to run the food bank, or about half of our budget. They also provide low-cost access to clothing, sports equipment, and household goods. I've had many people who have come through town and talk about Marathon has really high-quality thrift and reduce waste in the landfill. Because one of the things is not only are we selling some stuff, there's a big sorting process that goes on, and it goes into three categories, basically. What's going to be sold here, and what's going to be taken to Thunder Bay to other thrift stores, and what's going in the landfill. So, you know, all of that stuff would be in the landfill in other circumstances. And we send probably a couple of truckloads a month to thrift stores in Thunder Bay. Christmas hamper program, assist those in need at Christmas time, just kind of help people out when there's greater expenses and also more pressure to make Christmas happen for kids in particular. We did 114 hampers this year. We don't do hampers for Bittigong. We only do the Marathon. They have their own program and use the holiday train money for that as we use for here. And the community garden, just a place for people who want to grow some plants to eat or just to enjoy. It's located on the lawn at St. John's Church. They've been good about letting us use that. And we were always hoping that it would create a little bit of a community around it. They have a picnic table there and that kind of stuff. But so far, not too much. People come, do their gardening, and go. But we live in hope. So volunteers, and there's overlap in some of these. Food bank, we need at minimum 10. Thrift store, we need about 10. You think about a couple people operating the store, but every day of the week they're in there doing that sorting. It's not just on the days they're open. Hamper program, 6, community garden 3, and we have 9 directors at this time, so that'll be like our executive. Expenses, annual budget is anywhere between, has been over the last 5-6 years, $67,000 to $72,000 a year. $50,000 of that, it represents money we spend on food or gift cards. Property, we pay insurance, repairs. Since the town changed the garbage arrangement, we have ours contracted to the private organization. Water, snow removal, heat, and telephone adds up to close to $10,000. Christmas hampers are $6,500, and we spend $750 on toilet paper and other things. So our budget comes from $30,000 of it comes from what the thrift store generates, and then about $40,000 in other donations and donated food. There's Mayor Dumas trying to get more taxes for the town. Actually, he's been a reliable person who seems to have a real gift of squeezing some money out of people at the holiday train. So, and he uses the same picture every year, so I think it's his lucky one. And we usually collect about $500 that way, plus we get about $5,500 from the holiday train each year. So that almost covers the cost of our Christmas hamper programs. Other corporate and individual donations add up to about $8,400. Barrack being the largest one, and we've been doing Trick or Eat every year with that, and that's what that is, a big night of sorting a lot of food that comes in all at once and then figuring out where to store it. Firefighters gave us $1,800 this year. Special events, an example of that is the Symphony. When they're coming to town, they invite us to do the advertising and collect donations at the door. Thunder Bay District Social Service Administrative Board, we apply every year and generally get about $77.50. Now I can update this. There was a mix-up last year, and there wasn't a contribution from Bittigong last year, but in 2017, they gave $2,000 from the band council, and how do I make this go back? There we go. Okay, so and $1,000 from the Pick River Development Board. I did this presentation with them last week, and I heard by email, I haven't got the official letter, but they asked Debbie to contact me and let me know they put in a budget line of $6,000 a year, which was, I feel like it's really generous given the portion of the clients that we serve from there versus our own community. Marathon, and Daryl, you could probably confirm this, but my understanding is from the beginning is given $5,000 a year. So for 15 years, it's been the same, it hasn't changed. Some of the challenges that we face is the increase in cost in food. 15 years, our budget has been pretty much the same. You know what has happened to food prices since then. So, I mean, we're operating on the same budget, but people are just getting less. Also, there has not been cost of living upkeep with things like old age pension, like ODSP, Ontario Disabilities Program, or I always want to call it welfare. Ontario Works, thank you. All of those, none of those have had much increase over that time, so the demand is growing, the cost is growing, our budget has been the same. Plus our increasing expenses, heat has gone up quite a bit. We have electric heat over there. And since then, the town used to snow plow and do garbage for us. You don't now. And we, of course, face a challenge of shrinking volunteer pool. And by the way, I'm looking for someone for every other Friday, so anyone's interested. So the request, and I did this before I talked to Bittigong, but I was asking for a budget line for the town of at least $10,000, and I appreciate your consideration of that. And that wraps up what I have to say, but I hope there's some questions that I can answer.
So does anyone have, yep, Councillor Lake?
Sure. I mean, I think first thing is that, I think I speak for council when I say thank you for the volunteer work that the Community Collective does. I think it's an important role. I'm always amazed, and I've sort of transitioned on to being on the DSAB board, which looks at social services, and it feels like there's never enough. And certainly, I know there's programs out there, but that it doesn't seem like it's enough. I certainly was hoping guaranteed income would have been a thing we could have investigated, but what impresses me most is, one, that decision to be a public collective, and two, the little circle of life you have going with the thrift store and the food bank, and it's a pretty amazing little systemic process.
Yeah, and having a thrift store is something that I don't know of other food banks who set themselves up that way. So they're raising their full 70,000 every year or whatever, and we're able to do that. I mean, if you counted labor costs of our volunteers, we're looking at hundreds of thousands of dollars. And it's a very small group. I mean, I gave those numbers, but there's overlap in every one of those. There's people who do the thrift store, the food bank, help with the Christmas hamper, and, you know, rototill the gardens, you know?
Yeah.
Like,
yeah. I appreciate that. The other thing I really appreciate is your comments about moving to the cards. I think often we feel like those who are in need should be grateful for whatever they get, and I think that preservation of dignity is a pretty big principle when it comes to dealing with poverties and addictions or anything that we're looking at.
And our philosophy is, you know, you'll hear people say, well, you know, they got a good job. Why are they using the food bank? Well, we feel like if you need to come and get 3 days of food, you know, maybe you're in debt, maybe you have an addiction problem, we don't know. But we know you have kids who need to eat. We know you need to eat to do whatever it is you do. And, you know, every now and then that'll come up and we'll get some pushback in the community. The biggest challenge to the cards is people feel good giving their can of corn, you know? And somehow there was some sense that we should stick with that because it makes the donors feel happy. I don't think that's my highest priority, is to make donors feel happy. I think we can find other ways to raise money that can kind of be more useful to the actual clients.
Councillor Vance?
Like Councillor Lake said, I want to thank you for all your hard work, all the team's hard work, that the volunteer hours that they put behind all the projects you guys do. I have a few questions. When it comes to, I know the Trick or Eat event you guys run every Halloween, how are you going to mold that event now with the cards coming into play? Because I think the card idea is really great when you talk about dietary needs, allergies, that kind of stuff. It makes nothing but sense, but
Well, two things. One is that the cards don't preclude giving out food. If people give us food, what right now, it'll depend on how much food we have. So right now, we have enough food that we have shelves set up there, and you can pick 10 items off the shelf in addition to your card. And if we run low, then you can pick 5 items. You know, it's a big deal for some people to be able to pick that. You know, there was a young brother, sister who were there, and they were down to their last 1 pick each. And they were so excited because they figured out, if you get the can of blueberry pie filling and I get the graham cracker crumbs, we can have a pie. And I mean, I felt like crying, you know? I mean, I make a pie without even thinking about it. Well, I actually never make a pie, but I make cookies, but I could if I wanted to. But that's it, you know, it's that. But so we'll always give out food. It is Barrick that runs the Trick or Eat, and I spoke to Karen, who does it, about whether we could do money, and she didn't feel ready for that in October. And she felt that the people in the community wouldn't understand or want to do it. I'm hoping that maybe by next Halloween, she and I can talk about a way to do that, like have a smiley face coin box, name tag, you know, so that people can see that it's going to the food bank. It's not just some random person at your door saying,
Give me money.
yeah, no, I'm taking it to the food bank, honestly. You know, so hopefully we can work something out. But if Barrick decides, no, we want to do food, we'll take the food. It's just a lot of work, and we'll use it.
Perfect. And then another thing I wanted to discuss too would be when it comes to volunteers. So through my other hat as an employment advisor, we have opportunities where we work with youth who are looking to build their resume and stuff like that, who need volunteer experience. So we could touch base
Sure.
during my 9 to 5 and discuss opportunities that way for
we have,
volunteers.
to volunteer at anything, you can volunteer at anything there. The food bank, you have to be 18, you have to be, we always have 2 people working together, both for safety but also accountability. So generally high school students come thinking, oh, I'm going to get my hours. They need to come with a parent or
Right.
someone else who's older.
And just to clarify, our youth programs are up to 29.
Great.
So,
Okay, so thank you very much for
Okay.
your information.
Thank you.
We'll certainly deliberate on that during our budget process. Okay. So moving on to council reports. I have a report on appointments to committees and boards. So pursuant to the municipality's procedural bylaw, I am bringing forward this report on the appointment of residents to the town's committees and boards. All committee appointments will be until November 14th, 2022, which coincide with the term of council. So for the library board, we have Becky Johnson, Kim Walsh, Valerie Timrick, Judy Harmer, Susan Herchuk, and Mitchell Hatton, who will be a student member non-voting. For the Property Standards Appeal Committee, we have Ken McIntyre, and for Committee of Adjustment, we have Ken McIntyre. So I have a motion that council hereby accepts the attached report and recommendation on appointments to committees and boards, and further that the appointments be approved as presented for a term ending November 15th, 2023. So moved by Councillor Valance, seconded by Councillor Lake. Any questions on those appointments? Councillor Lake?
So maybe just a question for Becky. Is that a full complement for the library board, or are you still looking for volunteers, or?
We have to have a minimum of 5.
Okay.
And in our policies and procedures, it says up to 9.
Okay, so if somebody, it's so hard to find volunteers these days. Okay. If anybody out there is listening and thinking, boy, I'd love to sit on the library board, they could contact Becky Johnson. Okay.
Okay. So all in favor? Okay, carried.
Your worship, just one note to make on your resolution, the final date for the committee sitting will be November 14th, 2022,
Okay.
not 23. If you just want to make that change and
Yeah,
initial it
I'll
on the
make that
resolution,
change.
please.
Okay, next we have our student council reports. So Student Councillor Hatton, do you have anything to report on?
Let me think. So our junior boys and girls basketball and volleyball teams came in second place at our NSSSAA. Our senior girls volleyball and senior boys basketball have moved on to NWASA, where the senior girls had placed second and the senior boys placed first, and are now moving on to the OFSA, which is the Ontario Finals in London, and I believe their games start Monday. Other than that, I can't really think of anything else. We do have Pink Shirt Day coming up on Wednesday, the 27th, which is just a day to support anti-bullying, and it's really being promoted in our school this year, which is awesome to see. That's all I can think of off the top of my head.
Okay, thank you, and congratulations to all those players. Good job. So next we have our CAO report on declaration of surplus equipment.
So the town of Marathon has normally sold surplus items at the annual community garage sale or by public tender process. This year, redundant equipment will be listed for sale by tender with an advertisement in the Marathon Mercury and on the town's website. Administration has compiled a list of equipment that is recommended for sale, but in order to proceed, items must first be declared surplus to the municipality's needs as per bylaw number 1822, the town's procurement bylaw. Financially, any proceeds generated from the sale of town items will be deposited into general revenue, and your administration recommends that council declare the attached list of equipment, which includes a 2007 GMC van, a 2007 Chevy Silverado half-ton, and a 2009 International Sander, surplus to the municipality's needs, thereby authorizing administration to proceed with sale of the items, and that any proceeds of the sale be deposited into general operating and reserves. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So I have a motion here that council hereby accepts the attached report and recommendation on declaration of surplus equipment, and that council hereby deems the items as surplus to municipalities' needs and directs administration to proceed with the items of the sales, and further that any proceeds of the sale be deposited into general operating and reserves. Moved by Councillor Tabushi, seconded by Councillor Valance. Any questions on that? Okay, so all in favor? Carried. Okay, next we have a report on appointment of Municipal Integrity Commissioner.
So the Modernizing Ontario's Municipal Legislation Act 2017, otherwise known as Bill 68, received royal assent on May 30th, 2017. Bill 68 amends the Municipal Acts 2001, City of Toronto Act 2006, and Municipal Conflict of Interest Act to, number 1, enhance municipal accountability and transparency, 2, promote municipal financial sustainability, and 3, help ensure responsive and flexible municipal governments. Bill 68 requires that municipalities provide access to an integrity commissioner by March 1st, 2019, and require every municipality to ensure that all integrity commissioner responsibilities be provided by an integrity commissioner. Municipalities will have flexibility, including appointing an integrity commissioner, making arrangements for the commissioner responsibilities to be provided by an integrity commissioner of another municipality, or a combination of those. Municipalities must provide an indemnity to an integrity commissioner or any persons acting under his or her instructions. In each municipality, the commissioner will have the following responsibilities: the application to members of council and members of certain local boards of the municipality of the local codes of conduct, rules governing the ethical behavior of the members, key sections of the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act, conduct inquiries upon complaint under the Conflict of Interest Act and Code of Conduct matters, provide advice to members of councils and local boards respecting their obligations under the local Code of Conduct applicable to the members, the local ethical behavior procedures, rules, or policies governing the members, and the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act, as well as provide educational information to the public, the municipality, and members of council and local boards about local codes of conduct and the Act. An integrity commissioner will have powers to investigate Municipal Conflict of Interest Act complaints from electors or persons clearly acting in the public interest. And that's a key. It can't be a frivolous or vexatious request. It has to be within the public's interest. After completing an investigation, an integrity commissioner could decide to apply to a judge for a determination as to whether the member contravened the Conflict of Interest Act. If after investigating such a complaint, an integrity commissioner decided not to apply to a judge, the person making the complaint might do so at their cost. Financial implications for the municipality: $2,500 will be included in the 2019 municipal budget for this expense. Your options are: A, approve the appointment of a municipal integrity commissioner and direct administration to secure these services through a municipal service contract, or B, do not appoint a commissioner at this time. And your administration recommends that option A be selected, directing administration to secure a municipal integrity commissioner, and that the appropriate contract and municipal bylaw be brought forward at the March 11th regular meeting of council. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Skorchinski. So I have a motion here that council hereby accepts the attached report and recommendation on appointment of a municipal integrity commissioner, and further that administration is hereby authorized to secure a municipal integrity commissioner with the appropriate contract and bylaw being brought back to the March 11th, 2019 regular meeting of council. Moved by Councillor Valance and seconded by Councillor Tabushi. Any questions on that? Councillor Tabushi.
Yes, our requirements are by March 1st, so by doing this, we enact integrity commission process. We don't have to have it filled by March 1st. Is that correct?
Well, technically, yes and no. So the yes is, obviously, should you receive a complaint that's directed to an integrity commissioner, we would have to secure those services immediately. Administration does not foresee that at the current time. So we feel with 2 weeks from now is ample time for us to secure the services through a negotiation process, and then really bring the formality of the contract to council for approval.
Okay, any other questions? Councillor Lake?
Yeah, I mean, so absolutely support having you have to have somewhere to go if you're unhappy with the way government is acting, but it just feels like many of these dictates from the provincial government hit smaller communities much harder than they do large. There are certainly more than enough services within a big city to find somebody who does this sort of thing. I figure it's going to be difficult for us, and it's costly for us, and for all the small municipalities. I'm not sure if there's a way to respond back to the government to say, okay, we'll do this just like we do everything else you ask, but could you not have some service ready for small municipalities that don't have the capacity? Or, I mean, we're 3.5 hours from an airport, right? It just feels like there should be some help coming from the province to implement these in very small communities. It's another thing for our administration that's already taxed with lots of other things that are downloaded to go. And I'm sure we'll do a great job.
Yeah, I guess, two thoughts from administration. So, one is, one of the things that we will develop as part of this process is a very clear bylaw around what is ultimately reportable. So we're not dealing with requests that are frivolous in nature, because this is an expense and it does take time. And then I think to Councillor Lake's point, I think this is likely a very prime item for NOMA to discuss, especially, you'll see it in your agenda at the April conference, that these types of downloads and reporting requirements for municipalities, especially small rural northern municipalities, are very time consuming, and likely at that table I think it makes a lot of sense to have a further discussion.
Okay. Thank you. And yeah, Councillor Tabushi.
The other thing I was going to point out is we have at our disposal, or somewhat at our disposal, the ombudsman services through the provincial government. Is it not, or would it not make sense at NOMA or, through the our local representation to make that a possibility? If the ombudsman looks at the same kind of procedural issues, that would be paramount for us to do it, and then we can just default down to as we do the ombudsman.
So the major difference between the integrity commissioner and the ombudsman can only make recommendations. None of their actions can be binding on the municipality. The Integrity Commissioner makes recommendations, but the recommendation could be that it goes forward to a judge, and at that point it becomes binding legally on the municipality. That's the big difference.
Okay, thank you. So all in favor of that motion? Okay. Carried. Okay, next we have a report on Tax Appeal Reserve Fund. And Mr. Verbal.
Evening, Mayor and Council. At the regular meeting of Council on November 23rd in 1998, bylaw number 1181 established a reserve fund for potential tax appeals refunds. In previous years, the municipalities had property tax revenue at risk when large taxpayers such as Marathon Pulp Inc. and various Hemlo mining companies used the assessment tools to reduce their taxes payable to the town. Requests for reconsideration and appeals to the assessment review boards were lengthy processes, and they still are. But the outcomes were unknown, and the potential loss of revenue were not incorporated in the current fiscal year. There was the risk that any subsequent need to fund a tax appeal would have to be recognized in a future year, thereby requiring an increase in tax levy. Having a reserve fund would mitigate the risk and stabilize the tax levy for the current year. The last use of this reserve fund, which was not for a property tax appeal, occurred on October 25th, 2004, when $183,000 was used as general revenues in determining the 2004 budget deliberations. Since that time, the only activity has been the recognition of interest earned. On December 31st, 2018, the balance of the Tax Appeal Reserve Fund was $283,446. Two public sales for outstanding taxes were unsuccessful. The property known as DH Foods Limited at 14 Peninsula Road. The minimum bid for the last sale was $250,000. No offers were made. An allowance for doubtful accounts for the entire amount outstanding will be recognized in 2018. This bad debt expense was not included in the annual budget for that year. Since the bankruptcy of Marathon Pulp in 2009, the potential for a loss of property tax revenue has been offset by an allowance for doubtful accounts and bad debt expense recognized in those fiscal years. This reduces any operating surplus that could be transferred to a reserve for working funds or capital replacement. A reserve fund differs from a reserve in that the assets are segregated and restricted to meet the purpose of the reserve fund. Investment revenue, such as bank interest, must be added to the reserve fund. This is not a requirement for reserves. Interest earned is recognized as general revenue. It contributes to the operating surplus. The use of reserves funds must be authorized by a bylaw. Reserves are managed during the budget process, and from direction from council can be made through a resolution. The balance of reserves and reserves funds at the end of 2018, but I would like to note that the financial activities have not been finalized as of this date. The working fund reserve is $2.4 million. A reserve for equipment replacement is $1.4 million. $28,000 is set aside for a golf course. $33,000 is set aside for doctors' houses. The reserve fund for water and sewer is $2,749,000. As mentioned, the tax appeal reserve fund is $283,000. There is a reserve fund for fire department of $143,000, and $17,000 is set aside for the waterfront reserve fund. It is recommended that bylaw 1947 be approved, authorizing the transfer of the entire balance of the tax appeal reserve fund to be used for general revenues in 2018, and that bylaw number 1181 be repealed, thereby canceling the need for a tax appeal reserve fund. Any future substantial tax appeal refund will be covered by the working fund reserve. The recognition of bad debt expense in 2018 will have to be funded either through the use of this tax appeal reserve fund or the working funds reserve. At this time, it's not known whether there'll be an operating surplus for fiscal year 2018 that can be transferred to the working funds reserve. So there's several options. The first one is approved bylaw 1947, transferring the entire balance of the tax appeal reserve fund to be used for general revenues in 2018, and cancel the need for a tax appeal reserve by repealing bylaw 1181. Another option is to, again, transfer the entire balance of the tax appeal fund and repeal bylaw 1181, canceling the reserve fund, but also establish a contingency reserve at a later date. Another option is to maintain the tax appeal reserve fund and use the working fund reserve if required to cover the bad debt expense for 2018. Administration recommends that bylaw number 1947 be approved, authorizing administration to transfer the entire balance of the tax appeal reserve fund to be used for general revenues in 2018, and appeal bylaw 1181, canceling the need for a tax appeal reserve fund.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Verbo. So I have a motion that council hereby accepts the attached report and recommendation on tax appeal reserve fund, and further that the appropriate bylaw be adopted authorizing administration to transfer the entire balance of the tax appeal reserve fund to be used for general revenues in 2018, and repeal bylaw number 1181, canceling the need for tax appeal reserve fund. Moved by Councillor Tabushi, seconded by Councillor Valance. Any questions? Councillor Valance?
Yes, can we just get a little bit more clarification on what the contingency reserve account would look like, and is that just like a safety net?
Yeah, it would just, we would bring a report to council and we would stipulate what kind of contingency we want. Right now, we do have the working funds. It's used for contingencies right now, and it's sitting at $2.4 million. So we could have a contingency fund saying we will only use it for stuff unexpected, or such as, for example, the sanitary sewer failure we had this year, or if a piece of equipment broke down, or if a major employer declared bankruptcy and we lost property tax, that kind of thing.
Thank you.
Councillor Tabushi?
Yes, I understand the reasoning why. What I'm going to suggest is that I understand why you don't want it in a reserve fund versus reserves. My concern is that with the uncertainty of MPAC and the way they're ruling, I would really like to have some kind of contingency, and I understand we have that option out of the working funds. But the working funds is also there so that we can manage our cash flow, so we're not reliant on our taxes coming in before we can start spending. So if you can come up with a report, and I'm all in favor of dissolving the tax appeal fund, reserve fund, and again, for the people that may not understand, the reserve funds can only go to that project, but reserves we can allocate anywhere. Okay, I understand those issues, but I still think we need some kind of definition of how we can take money out of that working fund, because I am adamantly opposed to using that money to balance budgets.
Right.
Okay. Either we tax to a level that we can afford to spend, or we cut in order to maintain the taxation. But to balance the budget using our reserves is something that I will never support. Okay? So if you move forward on the contingency plan, at least from my consideration, make sure we have those stipulations in what we can use the contingency fund for.
Sure.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any other questions? So all in favor? Okay, carried. Okay. Next, we have a report on staff council relations. Ms. Gauthier will read the report.
Good evening, Your Worship, members of council. Section 270 of the Municipal Act 2001, as revised by Bill 68, requires every municipality to adopt and maintain a policy with respect to the relationship between members of council and employees of the corporation by March 1st, 2019. The council staff protocols policy identifies the legislation, policies, procedures, and practices that the municipality complies with in order to promote a respectful relationship between members of council and employees of the town of Marathon. Options: A, approve the policy as presented. B, approve the policy with amendments. Your administration recommends that option A be selected and that policy CO008 be approved as presented, and further that this policy be included in the town's policy guideline manual and posted on the town's website.
Okay, thank you. So I have a motion that council hereby accepts the attached report and recommendation on staff council relations policy, and that policy CO0008, council staff protocol, be approved as presented, and further that a copy of this policy be included in the town's policy and guideline manual and posted on the town's website. Moved by Councillor Lake, seconded by Councillor Valance. Any questions?
I guess it would be this. For my duration of time on council, relations have been very good between council and administration, and it was funny reading the policy. It's kind of like, well, yeah, this is what we do, but I would imagine there are instances in other municipalities or potentially with this council where that relationship dissolves. So it was actually quite edifying to see if things went south, what it would end up looking like. So I appreciate that just in terms of an education for council, and also as a probably reminder that we should endeavor to keep our wonderful relationship, because it would get really messy otherwise, right?
Thank you. So all in favor? Carried. Okay, next we have a report on pregnancy and parental leave policy for council members. Ms. Gauthier.
In accordance with Bill 68, every municipality shall pass a pregnancy and parental leave policy for council members by March 1st, 2019. The town of Marathon recognizes council members' right to take leave for pregnancy, the birth of a member's child, or the adoption of a child by a member. The policy attached meets the requirements of the Municipal Act 2001 as amended by Bill 68. The Act allows an absence of up to 20 weeks for pregnancy and parental leave. The policy was drafted to ensure as much flexibility as possible for members of council, recognizing their unique representative role. Options: A, approve the policy as amended. B, approve the policy with amendments. Your administration recommends that option A be selected and that policy CO009 be approved as presented, and further that this policy be included in the town's policy guideline manual and posted on the town's website.
Okay, thank you. So I have a motion that council hereby accepts the attached report and recommendation on pregnancy and parental leave policy for council members, and that policy CO009, pregnancy and parental leave for members of council, be approved as presented. And further that a copy of this policy be included in the town's policy guideline manual and posted on the town's website. Moved by Councillor Tabushi, seconded by Councillor Lake. Any questions? Councillor Lake?
Although not planning to get pregnant myself, the one thing I want to make sure I read correctly is so you can take 20 weeks and still be considered a member of council. But if there was a meeting with a topic that was particularly important to you, you can go to the meeting and still vote even though you've missed meetings on either side. So like you can at any moment come back. That's the way I read it, right?
That is correct. So the member taking leave doesn't require council's approval to take the leave. So once the policy is approved, the leave is available at 20 weeks. Their seat is not declared vacant at that time, which means that they're able to participate fully as they choose in those 20 weeks.
Okay, again, so I'm just thinking if one of the members was on parental leave and again an important meeting came up, they really wanted their voice to be heard, you could show up,
Absolutely.
cast your vote, and then but still be on leave.
Still be on leave.
I think that's
correct.
important because if something obviously big came up, I'd want to see that protected. Okay.
Absolutely. Councillor Tabushi?
For all the changes in philosophies or attitudes, and I guess Wednesday being red or pink shirt Wednesday, I commend this Bill 68 for the fact that they included no gender-specific clauses, and the inclusion of adoptive child is mentioned in it. Why I bring this up is 22 years ago when we went through the process, I was forced to take a leave of absence without pay to exercise my right as a parent, and had no benefits under the Employment Insurance Act because we adopted. So I think we've made progress in the 20 years, and I commend Bill 68 for some of its flaws, but I understand why we needed Bill 68 to protect the rights of employees and dealing with, the wellness and how family should come first. So I commend Bill 68 in this portion.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments? Okay, all in favor? Carried. Okay, so next I have a motion for the January check runs. So I have a motion that the following check runs be approved for payment. Accounts payable, $643,000, and payroll, $185,920. Moved by Councillor Lake, seconded by Councillor Tabushi. Any questions on that? All in favor? Carried. Okay, so next we'll move into our reports on appointed members to boards and committees. Councillor Valance.
All right, I'm super excited to announce the new board of directors for the Marathon and District Chamber of Commerce for 2019. So as president, we have Dana Bobrowski-Vogt. Past president, we have Gord Linfield. Vice president, Tyler Davis. We have secretary, Jessica Paris. The treasurer is Don McKay. And acting as directors, we have Christina Burke, Kristen Birch-Burton, Jim Collins, Bob Hantro, Stan Johnson, and Brandon Lamoureux.
Okay. Thank you, and congratulations to all those on their new appointments. Next I have an report on the library board. So first of all, the library would like to announce that there will be an arts camp happening for March break. So if anyone has questions on that, go see Tamara at the library. I understand there'll be a couple of teachers there that'll be teaching this program. The board also wanted to thank council for the consideration for the budget process. At our last meeting, we did go through all the budget numbers. So the library board was very happy with that consideration. And finally, the board wanted me to clarify the stats that were counted. So there was a question when we were doing the budget deliberation about the numbers of people walking in and out. So the library counts the numbers of people coming in. If you leave and come back in, it is a new number, a new stat. That is the way it's counted across the province. So they're just following provincial standards on counting their library usage. So next I have a motion for bylaw number 1947. So that a bylaw to withdraw funds from the tax appeal reserve fund and to repeal bylaw number 1181 being a bylaw for the establishment of a tax appeal reserve fund be read a first and second time this 25th day of February 2019. Moved by Councillor Valance, seconded by Councillor Lake. Any questions? Okay, all in favor? Carried. Okay, and I have a motion that bylaw number 1947 be read a third time and finally pass this 25th day of February 2019. Moved by Councillor Lake, seconded by Councillor Valance. Any questions? All in favor? Carried. So I have a request has been received from NOMA seeking support of their resolution regarding the Ontario Endangered Species Act, copy to all members. So I have a motion that council hereby supports the resolution received from NOMA regarding the Ontario Endangered Species Act, and further that a copy of this motion be forwarded to the individuals listed on the original request. Moved by Councillor Lake, seconded by Councillor Tabushi. Any questions? Councillor Lake.
So as much as I think everybody probably supports protecting the environment, I remember, boy, it might be 5 or 6 years ago, the Real Tree Hugger campaign that was kind of put out saying, you know, people that work in the forest industry, people that work in mining have a vested interest in making sure the environment functions as well. I know the CAO, working with the forestry companies, probably in a good position to make the case that the Endangered Species Act is not good for forestry, which manages the forest. I just wonder if you can share some of the problems that this legislation has on our region in particular.
Well, what it creates and what NOMA is asking for, and they're correct in having lived a lot of 8 years of my life, putting NFMC together. Really, the Crown Forest Sustainability Act already contains all of the provisions that are contained within the Endangered Species Act. So by applying the Endangered Species Act to the forestry sector, what you're theoretically now is applying two sets of legislation, one which already exists. So really what NOMA is saying is that that's not required. Ontario's Crown Forest Sustainability Act is one of the best on the planet in terms of protecting endangered species and species of concern. So what they're saying is just keep applying and the Crown Forest Sustainability Act in its current form, and ensure that the applicability of the Endangered Species Act isn't applied a second time to the forestry sector. So administratively, I would recommend that council support it.
Thank you for that clarification, Councillor Tabushi.
And this would also provide, I'll say, global agencies another avenue to appeal when they didn't get the result they wanted from the Forest Management Act. And that's why it becomes redundant, and you argue the same case twice if they don't like the results the first time. Is that correct?
That is certainly a possibility. There would be two sets of legislation applied to the forest sector when everybody else would have one.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? So all in favor? Carried. Next, information has been received regarding the Northwestern Ontario Municipal Association Spring Conference scheduled for April 24th to the 26th, 2019 in Thunder Bay. So I have a motion that council approves the attendance of the following individuals to the NOMA Spring Conference scheduled for April 24th to 26th in Thunder Bay. Is there anybody interested in going to that conference? Yeah, Councillor Tabushi.
So just a comment. The only thing I would, and obviously it's a determination by Councillor Valance, but any opportunity you can attend these conferences as your first term, I'd encourage you to do so. So I'm more than willing not to go, and it doesn't work for me anyways. But remember too, the mayor is a board member, so his attendance would obviously be, paramount also.
So Your Worship, two suggestions. So you can certainly, put the mayor down. He will be attending. The budget does include for all of council to attend NOMA. So everybody does have that ability within the current budget. And my suggestion would be, if you're unsure if you're able to attend, put your name down and withdraw at a later date, as opposed to having us to bring another resolution forward to approve it at a further time.
Okay, Councillor.
And I believe NOMA is traditionally the conference we send our student councillors to.
That is correct. We have in the past.
For Councillor Hatton, I know it's a pretty good learning experience. As long as you're not the only one who shows up. Last year, Michael Stone drove through a snowstorm and was the only representative from Marathon at the conference. So we can probably arrange to travel up together in the town vehicle. But it is a good opportunity for students. And I know in the past the Premier has met with our student councillors, and it's been pretty exciting.
Yeah, so certainly I would suggest we put Councillor Hatton's name down, and as well as Councillor Stone, and they can have a further discussion with Ms. Lees around the logistics of the conference. And generally the school has been very accommodating as well when letting the students go.
Okay, so I will add both their names. Councillor Lake, Councillor Valance as well. Okay, and I'll put mine as well.
put it down and I will see if I can clear my screen. Well, this is when we also all get to vote too. Oh. I'm sorry. This is also important because every member we send gets to vote on resolutions and elections. Yes, you're right, and that is why we send off. Sorry. Yep.
Okay, so I need a mover and a seconder to put this on the floor then. Councillor Lake and Councillor Valance. Okay, and all in favor of everybody going? Approved. Thank you. Okay, so next I'm going to announce that members are going to be going into a closed session immediately following adjournment of the regular meeting to discuss a trade secret or scientific, technical, commercial, financial, or labor relations information supplied in confidence to the municipality or local board, which, if disclosed, could reasonably be expected to prejudice significantly the competitive position or interfere significantly with the contractual or other negotiations of a person, group of persons, or organizations. Okay. So I have a motion to adjourn at the hour of 8 p.m. Moved by Councillor Valance, seconded by Councillor Tabushi. And all in favor? Carried.
Have a great week.